The chamber is open and full of whispers.
Before we dive in, check the link in the description if you want exclusive timelines, members-only videos you won't find on YouTube, all on our Patreon. The compartment Harry had chosen was third from the end of the train. Not the first available, not the last, the third, selected because it had windows on both sides and a door that slid cleanly on its track without resistance. Small things. The kind of things you noticed when you had spent 10 years in an environment where every variable either worked for you or against you, and there was never anything neutral between. He had his trunk stowed, his owl settled, and his shoes off and his feet up on the seat opposite when the door opened. The boy who stepped in had the specific quality of someone told from birth that every room he entered belonged to him, and had not yet encountered evidence to the contrary. Pale, precise, blonde in the way that looked expensive. He was followed by two larger boys who positioned themselves in the doorway with the practiced ease of people who had stood in doorways before. He looked at Harry. Harry looked back. "I heard Harry Potter was on the train," the boy said. Not to the two behind him, to Harry directly, which was more than most managed. Most people addressed the space beside Harry, or some imagined version of him assembled from a story they'd been told. "You heard right," Harry said. "Draco Malfoy." He said it the way people said things meant to carry weight, and watched Harry's face for the response. Harry's face did nothing in particular. He had spent the last 3 weeks reading, not the textbooks. Those could wait. Everything available about the wizarding world's social architecture, the old families, the names that meant something, and the names that meant everything. He had found Malfoy in 4 separate sources. He knew what it was connected to, what it had done to maintain those connections, and what it wanted. He also knew what it was worth to someone who knew how to use it correctly. "I know who you are," Harry said. Malfoy extended his hand. Harry looked at it, not at the hand itself, but at what it represented. This was not a friendly gesture between 2 11-year-olds on a train. This was an invitation into a specific arrangement, a hierarchy with Draco Malfoy at its peak and Harry Potter as its most valuable acquisition. The boy who lived, collected and displayed. Harry took his feet off the opposite seat. He sat up straight. He looked at Draco Malfoy for a long, unhurried moment, the attention of someone who was not intimidated, not impressed, and was conducting a genuine assessment. "Before I answer that," Harry said, "I want to say something." Malfoy's hand stayed where it was. His expression shifted fractionally. Not irritation, something more interested than irritation. He had prepared for acceptance or rejection. He had not prepared for this. "Say it," Malfoy said. "I've been no one for 10 years, Harry said. "I lived in a cupboard. I wore hand-me-downs. I was told every day that I was less than nothing, and I believed it for a while, because I didn't know any better." He said it without performance, the way you stated facts about a building's construction, without bidding for sympathy. "I'm done with that. I'm not going to trade one version of it for another." Malfoy said nothing. "If I take your hand," Harry said, "it's not because you're a Malfoy and I'm the boy who lived and you think that makes us useful to each other. It's because we decide, between us, that we're building something neither of us could build alone. And we answer to that. Not to your father, not to Dumbledore, not to whoever thinks they already own either of us." He paused. "That's my condition." Something moved in Draco's expression that was genuinely difficult to categorize, not because it was controlled, though it was, but because it was real. And real reactions were always harder to read than performed ones. He had come to this compartment expecting a transaction. He had received a negotiation. Nobody negotiated with Draco Malfoy. "We answer to what we build," Draco said. Not repeating it, testing its weight in his own mouth. "Yes," Harry said. "Not to my father. Not to anyone else's design," Harry said. "Only our own." Draco Malfoy had been told, in various formulations and with varying degrees of subtlety, exactly what his life would look like from the moment he was born. The trajectory of it had been presented not as a choice, but as a conclusion, simply what was. He was 11 years old, and someone had just handed it back to him as if it were a question. He found, somewhat to his own surprise, that he wanted to answer it. He kept his hand where it was. Harry took it. The handshake lasted 3 seconds. Firm, equal, neither of them performed it. Ron Weasley found the compartment some time after 11. He slid the door open with the cheerful imprecision of someone who had grown up in a house where doors were never entirely closed, looked at the two boys sitting across from each other, Harry by the window, Draco opposite, the two large boys settled in the remaining seats, and performed a rapid, visible recalculation. "Everywhere else is full," Ron said, which was not entirely true, but was the socially acceptable version of having been looking for Harry specifically. "There are seats in the next compartment," Draco said, not rudely, as a statement of accurate geography. Ron looked at Harry. Harry looked back. Something moved in his expression, not quite apology, not quite justification. The specific look of someone who has made a choice and is watching its first consequence arrive, and is not reversing the choice, but is not pretending the consequence, is nothing either. "Sorry," Harry said. Genuinely, Ron read the room with the efficiency of someone raised among 6 brothers, noting in under 2 seconds whether a situation was still in motion or had already settled. This one had settled. He left. Somewhere in the middle of the journey, a 5th-year Gryffindor prefect moved through the train in the way prefects did on the first day, locating first years and delivering the standard remarks about house pride and community. She found Harry in Draco's compartment and slid the door open with the authority of someone who had been given a badge and intended to use it. "First years," she said, addressing Harry specifically, "are expected at the Gryffindor first-year orientation after the lunch trolley. Head boy and girl welcome the new intake. He's not a Gryffindor," Draco said. "The sorting hasn't happened yet," she said. "But given who he is, an assumption," Draco said. "Based on nothing documented." He had a small leather-bound book open on his knee, not a textbook, a volume on school regulations. The kind that existed in the Malfoy library precisely because knowing rules was how you controlled the people who assumed they were using them. Prefect responsibilities under the student code cover students of your assigned house. They don't extend to pre-sorted first years, and they don't authorize assumed house placement prior to the ceremony. He glanced up. "You're also holding your badge at the wrong angle. The pin backing has shifted right. The enamel is at risk of stress fracture. Worth fixing before the term photograph." The prefect looked at her badge. She looked at the book. She left. Harry looked at Draco. "The badge," Harry said. "Was that real?" Draco turned a page. "Does it matter?" he said. Outside, England gave way to the rougher, greener texture of the north, and in the third compartment from the end, 2 11-year-olds sat in the particular comfortable silence of people who had just begun something and were both smart enough to know it. The boats crossed the lake in the dark. Harry sat in one of the small vessels with Draco beside him and 2 other first years across. He was not looking at the castle, though the castle was impossible to ignore, towering above the water with the specific gravity of something that had been there long enough to stop pretending it could be anywhere else. He was looking at the lake, at the quality of the darkness on its surface, not flat, not empty, carrying depth in the way that large bodies of water did, the sense of something extensive operating below the visible line. The giant squid was in there somewhere. The merpeople, things that had their own arrangements with this water and nothing to do with the school above it. He filed it. There was a great deal to file. The great hall was larger than necessary, which was its own statement. The enchanted ceiling reflected the night sky, cloud thick, star scattered, above 4 long house tables and the staff table at its head. Dumbledore sat at the center of the staff table with the expression of a man who had watched the future walk through these doors every autumn for half a century and found it consistently more interesting than he'd anticipated. The Sorting Hat sat on a stool and sang. Harry listened with genuine attention. The song was not a performance. It was a statement of operational philosophy, the compressed logic of a system that had been running for 1,000 years. Be brave, it said. Be clever. Be loyal. Be ambitious. Harry thought ambition is a direction, not a value. The question is what you are ambitious toward. He filed that too. The names went alphabetically. Harry watched each sorting with the same attention he'd given the lake, not to judge the outcomes, but to understand the system. The hat worked quickly through most students. Some required longer. A girl with a nervous, forward-leaning energy sat under the brim for over 40 seconds before being directed to the Slytherin table, where she sat down, looked at the table surface briefly, and then looked up with an expression that had resolved into something composed and decided. Draco leaned slightly toward Harry. "Interesting," he said, very quietly. "Yes," Harry said. When his own name was called, the hall went quiet in the way it reserved for Harry Potter specifically, not the organic silence of interrupted conversation, but the sudden, conscious silence of many people making a simultaneous decision to pay attention. He walked to the stool. He sat. The hat descended. "Well," said a voice that arrived not from outside but from within the same space as his own thoughts, "you're more prepared than most." "I've had time to think about it," Harry said. "Most 11-year-olds haven't thought about it at all. They sit down and I find them. You sat down already knowing what you wanted me to find." A pause. "That's either impressive or troubling. Possibly both." "I'll take possibly both," Harry said. The hat made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "Let me tell you what I see. Bravery, yes, the genuine kind, not the performed kind. Built from years of having no good options and choosing the least bad one repeatedly without being destroyed by it. Loyalty, but selective. You're not loyal to people by default. You're loyal to arrangements you've chosen. That's rarer." Another pause. "And ambition. Not inherited, self-generated. You want to build something because you have spent your entire life having nothing, and you have decided, with a clarity most adults never reach, that having nothing was a starting point, not a permanent condition." "Yes," Harry said. "Gryffindor would have you. Your father's house. There is a version of your life that begins at that table and is, not lesser. Real, good, even, the friends you would make there would matter to you." Harry thought about Ron Weasley's face in the compartment doorway. "I know," he said, "but you've already chosen." "I've made an agreement," Harry said. "I don't break agreements." "No," the hat said. "I can see that." A long pause, long enough that the hall had shifted from quiet to the held, wondering stillness of people starting to ask questions. "You understand precisely what you're giving up. They always think they're gaining something. You know what it costs." "I am gaining something," Harry said. "I just know what it costs." The pause stretched. The hall held its breath. Several minutes passed. A hat stall, in the old parlance, the kind of sorting that announced itself by its duration alone. Then the brim opened. Slytherin. The Slytherin table applauded with the measured quality of people whose emotional expressions had been calibrated since childhood. Controlled welcome, communicating approval without performing it. The rest of the hall had the quality of a room where something had fallen, and everyone was waiting to see if it had broken. Harry walked to the Slytherin table and sat down next to Draco. "A hat stall," Draco said after a moment. "It wanted to be sure," Harry said. "Of what?" "That I understood what I was choosing," Harry said. "It takes longer when the choice is genuinely complicated." Draco considered this. "Mine was a few seconds," he said. "Was that long enough?" Harry said. A pause. "No," Draco said, with the flat honesty of someone who had not previously had occasion to admit it. The feast arrived. The Slytherin table operated on different social logic. quieter conversations, drier humor when it appeared. The hierarchy visible not in who spoke loudest, but in who was listened to when they spoke quietly. Across the hall, Ron Weasley had found Harry's position at the Slytherin table and was looking at him with the expression of someone updating a significant assumption. Harry held his gaze for a moment. Then, he looked away. When a third-year boy 2 seats down made pointed comments about Hermione Granger's parentage, dentists, muggle-born, the implication gathering in his expression before he finished the sentence, Draco set down his knife. "The hat sorted her," he said, not loudly. "It has sorted students for 1,000 years without requiring the commentary of a third year to verify its work." He looked at the boy with an expression that had no heat in it, which was more effective than heat would have been. "House unity applies to everyone at this table, including the people you didn't expect to find here." The boy looked at his plate. The table had gone quiet in the way tables went quiet when something was being established rather than argued. Hermione looked at Draco. "Thank you," she said. "House unity," Draco said. "It applies." The Slytherin common room lay below the lake. Harry had understood this before he saw it, but understanding it and seeing it were different things. The windows looked out into the water, not at the surface, but into the depth. The green, dark middle distance where light from above dissolved before reaching the bottom. Shapes moved past occasionally. The giant squid, once a single arm drifting across the glass with the unhurried confidence of something that had no predators. The room was long and low-ceilinged, with dark leather chairs and a fireplace that burned with a greenish tint. Everything about it said, "You're below the rest of the school, and you know things they don't." Harry sat in an armchair nearest the window on his first night, and thought about that for a long time. Marcus Flint ran the common room the way certain people ran small territories, through accumulated incidents, none formally documented. All of them understood. He found Harry and Draco on the third evening, and stood in front of their chairs by the window, with the posture of someone confident in his arithmetic. "First years sit at the back tables," he said. "Is that written somewhere?" Draco said. "It's how it works. How things work and how things are documented are different categories," Draco said. "One of them can be changed." Flint turned to Harry specifically. The calculation was visible. The name was the source of the problem. The name was the target. "The wrong chairs," Flint said. Harry turned from the window, where a small school of fish had been moving through the middle distance, in the coordinated pattern of things operating on shared instinct. "Tell me about the right of regency," Harry said. The quality of the room's attention shifted. Flint went still. "Where did you hear that?" "The Black Family Archive," Harry said. Draco's mother's family kept records of house customs going back to the 18th century. The right of regency, a formal challenge for informal house leadership. Non-lethal, witnessed, binding, invoked by documented right of standing, not by seniority. Draco had closed his book. "You've been running this common room through intimidation and precedent. Neither is binding under the right. We're invoking it. Your first years," Flint said. "The historical record documents a 4th year challenging a 7th year and winning," Harry said. "The mechanism is merit, not seniority." Flint looked between them. Refusing was available. But the room was watching, and the room had just heard 2 first years invoke a formal mechanism that Flint had been hoping no one in this generation had bothered to read about. "Name the trial," he said. The trial happened on a Saturday evening, in front of the assembled common room. Professor Snape appeared at the doorway and stood with his arms folded, saying nothing, his presence its own form of authorization. The format was knowledge, wizarding contract law as it applied to house governance and the rights of lineage heirs within the school's institutional structure. A subject, Harry had noted when Draco proposed it, that had exactly 2 people in the school who had studied it properly. One of them was standing next to Harry. The other was currently in the doorway in a teaching capacity. Flint answered the first question partially. Harry answered the remainder, including a specific 19th century Wizengamot opinion on the limits of Hogwarts' authority over student self-governance. Draco answered the second question in full and added 2 related points, which Snape received without expression or correction. In the context of Snape, that was equivalent to applause. By the 4th question, the result was clear. When it was finished, Harry looked at Flint directly. "We're not dismantling your position," Harry said. Quietly, for Flint, not for the room. "We're establishing that the common room runs on a different principle: competence over precedent, preparation over intimidation." He paused. "You're going to be a good Quidditch captain. That's worth more in practical terms than controlling who sits where." Flint looked at the chairs by the window for a long moment. "Sit where you want," he said, not warmly. Accurately, the room exhaled. In the doorway, Snape looked at Harry Potter for a moment that lasted precisely as long as it needed to. Then, he left. The invitation arrived during the winter holidays. Not a letter, a key. Small, iron, old enough that the teeth were worn smooth at the edges, arriving in a plain envelope addressed to Hermione Granger in Draco's precise handwriting with a single explanatory line inside: Malfoy Manor. The 27th. Bring your research notes. Hermione had been in the Slytherin common room for 4 months. She had learned its rhythms, distinguished between students who were worth engaging and those performing blood ideology like a script they'd been handed and never examined, and had been reading from the common room's shelves, 3 texts not on any course list, shelved between the Quidditch history and a worn potions reference, since October. She packed her notes. Malfoy Manor in winter was cold with intention. Not the passive, absorbed cold of old stone, a communicated cold, designed to tell you something specific about the people inside. Draco met her at the entrance. "Harry's in the East Library," he said. "2nd floor. There's more than one." "How many?" 3. The public one for guests, the working one for family use, and the East Library. He started up the staircase. "Nobody has used the East Library since my grandfather." "Why not?" "Because it contains things my father finds politically inconvenient," Draco said, "and things my grandfather found too valuable to destroy." The door to the East Library was a section of wall, paneled in the same dark wood as the corridor, seam barely visible, the lock manifesting only when the key was brought near. The room beyond was not large. 3 walls of shelves, floor to ceiling. A reading table in the center. Harry was there with several books open and a page of notes in his careful, economical handwriting. He looked up when they entered. "3rd shelf on the left," he said to Hermione. "We're starting with wardcraft and arithmancy. The back wall is lineage and legal history. The right wall is other things. The left wall first." Hermione looked at the spines. "Read the 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd." She turned around. "These haven't been catalogued," she said. "No, some of these titles aren't in the Hogwarts library. Not anywhere. I checked the card catalog. They wouldn't be," Draco said. "The Hogwarts library acquires through ministry-approved channels. How old is the oldest one?" "The foundational legal text on lineage inheritance rights," Harry said. "Back wall, far right, 2nd shelf from the bottom. It's in Middle English. The lamp has a translation charm. It's also where the historical record of the right of regency first appears. What the Hogwarts records date to the 18th century exists in older form here." Hermione pulled out her notebook. "We need a system," she said, already writing. "Cataloging first. Subject, date, condition, cross-references. Then we read in dependency order, foundational texts before derivative ones. And a shared notation system so our notes are compatible." Harry looked at Draco. Draco looked at Harry. "She's been here 4 minutes," Draco said. "I know," Harry said. "She's already more organized than my grandfather." "I heard that," Hermione said. They catalogued for 2 days. The inventory revealed dozens of texts not held anywhere in the Hogwarts system, a significant number that existed in the restricted section only in later and less complete editions, and a handful with no external reference at all, acquired, read, and apparently erased from any record of their existence. On the second afternoon, Hermione found the Arithmancy Ward grimoire. Small, leather-bound. The second chapter described a resonance test, a diagnostic for identifying the arithmetic signature of a caster's magic, which the author argued was as individual as a fingerprint. She read it twice. Then she set it on the table. "Can we do this?" she said. Harry read the relevant passage. "The anchor object needs to be silver," he said, "and the mathematical sequence requires 3 variables held simultaneously." "I can do that," Hermione said. "I know. That's not what I'm asking." He looked at her. "I'm asking whether you want the result. It will tell you something specific about the nature of your magic. Something you won't be able to unknow." Hermione understood the distinction. "Yes," she said. "I want it." Draco produced a silver letter opener from the writing desk. Old, plain, the kind of object that had absorbed 2 centuries of ambient magic. Hermione held it flat across both palms and ran through the mathematical sequence. 3 variables, held not sequentially but simultaneously, which was the part most people found impossible, and which Hermione found simply a matter of holding the right kind of attention. The silver went warm. Then it reached the specific temperature of something conducting something through it, and its surface developed a pattern. Not frost, a geometric arrangement, faint and angular, in the structure of arithmetic notation. It held for 11 seconds. Then it faded. Hermione read the residue with the grimoire's interpretation key. She read it again. "Ward affinity," she said. "High tier. Analytical construction rather than intuitive. I build wards mathematically rather than feeling them into place." She checked the text. The grimoire calls it the Ravenclaw line methodology, associated historically with the founder's direct teaching lineage. "Not bloodline," Harry said. "Methodology? Methodology," she confirmed. "The pattern of how I think." She looked at the silver letter opener. "It's not about who my parents are." "No," Draco said, with the tone he used when arriving at a conclusion he found satisfying. "It's about how your mind works. And your mind works in a way most people in this school have never encountered. Because most people in this school have never had access to a text that could identify it." Hermione had spent 11 years being told, in various ways, that the way her mind worked was too much. She had never had a word for what it actually was. Analytical construction. High-tier ward affinity. A precise description, written in the 17th century, of something she had been doing since she was old enough to think. She closed the grimoire. "I want to read the Wardcraft texts next," she said. "Independency order. Starting with the foundational theory." "I know," Harry said. "All of them." "I know," he said again. From the corridor doorway, a voice. Draco Lucius Malfoy stood in the corridor, tall, pale, silver blonde, with the expression of a man who has found something in a room he believed was locked. He looked at his son, at Harry Potter, at Hermione Granger holding a 17th century grimoire. "I didn't know we had guests," he said carefully. "Harry and Hermione," Draco said. "She's been helping catalog the East Library." Lucius looked at the grimoire. "That text is not suitable for someone with a high-tier ward affinity and analytical construction methodology." Hermione set it on the table, spine up. The resonance test in Chapter 2 would suggest otherwise. Lucius looked at the letter opener, at the faint geometric residue still visible on its surface. He looked at his son. Draco met his gaze without movement. "Dinner is at 7, Lucius said. He left. The door to the East Library remained open. Hermione found her page and kept reading. Harry had noted the third-floor corridor announcement at the feast, the specific phrasing of it, "Those who do not wish to die a most painful death," which was not a prohibition but an invitation to anyone paying the right kind of attention. Prohibitions said you may not. This had said here as a consequence, which left the decision with the person receiving it. He filed it. He went to Draco in January. They gathered in the east corner of the Slytherin common room with Hermione between them and her research notes and a copy of a Gringotts annual assets movement report she had obtained through the bank's public records office. The stone's transfer from Gringotts to the school, Hermione said, was conducted under an emergency custodial arrangement. It bypassed the standard verification protocols that would normally require documentation of the receiving party's security infrastructure. She turned a page. Under the International Wizarding Banking Framework, that makes the transfer procedurally incomplete. The stone remains, in a strict legal sense, an improperly relocated asset. Which means, Draco said, that a formal petition to the bank requesting clarification of the stone's custodial status is not only viable, it's warranted. We're not going after the stone, Harry said. We're going after the paperwork around it. The petition went out under the joint names of the Potter and Malfoy family accounts. 3 pages, precise, paraphrased into clean legal language by Draco, stripped of everything unnecessary by Harry. A Gringotts senior asset recovery officer named Brasslock arrived at Hogwarts in person the following week, in-person attendance being its own communication about seriousness, and requested a meeting with the deputy headmistress. Harry and Draco attended his petitioning parties. The banking framework, Brasslock confirmed, provided exactly the mechanism Hermione had identified. The transfer was procedurally incomplete. The bank was prepared to offer a formal custodial resolution. The ministry clerk dispatched to observe produced 3 procedural objections, each of which had been anticipated in the petition's documentation. McGonagall looked at the 2 first-year students sitting to the side of her office. "You filed this petition," she said. "Yes," Harry said. "Why? Because something is in this school that someone wants badly enough to build an elaborate obstacle course around," Harry said. "And the protection, while creative, is not sufficient for what the stone represents. Gringotts' security is." He looked at her steadily. "The stone should be there." McGonagall was quiet for a moment. "You know what the stone is," she said. "Nicholas Flamel," Harry said. "Yes, the stone left Hogwarts the following morning under a Gringotts security transport and a ward array that McGonagall later described to Flitwick as considerably more impressive than anything currently protecting the 3rd-floor corridor." The corridor went quiet after that. Whatever had been testing the protections stopped trying, because what it was trying to reach was gone. Harry watched the transport depart from the common room window. "Whoever put it here for someone to find," Draco said, "beside him has nothing left to find. And Flamel lives," Harry said. "Those are both true." He thought about the kind of person who had built those protections, the elaborate, creative, genuinely impressive architecture of them. The kind of mind that worked that way. He filed it. Snape's note arrived under the door of the east corner of the common room, a single line, compressed and precise, "My office. Saturday, 7 in the morning. Come alone, both of you." Harry read it and passed it to Draco. "Both of you," Draco said. Contradictory phrasing. "He means without Hermione," Harry said. "First, Hermione comes after, if there's an after." The dungeon corridor was cold at 7 in the morning, and Snape's office door was open by a 1/4 inch. He had heard them coming and had made the decision before they knocked. Inside, the room was as it always was. Preserved specimens, ingredient shelves, a desk clear except for a single open book and something steaming that was not tea. Snape stood at the window with his back to them. Harry understood this was not rudeness. It was a form of permission, giving them the room to settle before the conversation began. He and Draco sat without being invited. Snape turned. "Your mother," he said to Harry, without preamble or softening, "was my closest friend. From the age of 9 until I was 16 years old, and made a choice that ended it." He said this with the flatness of a reported fact that had long since moved past the capacity for further damage. She was Muggle-born. She was the most naturally gifted charms practitioner I've encountered in 30 years of combined teaching and practice, and she understood the structural logic of magic, the way it operated underneath the surface of what wands and incantations made visible. With a clarity I have seen in perhaps 4 other people in my lifetime, Harry was very still. "I watch you in this school," Snape said. "The 3 of you. What you built in the common room. What you brought to the bank. The way you think." He looked at his desk. "It is not comfortable to watch." "Because it reminds you of something," Harry said. "Because it reminds me," Snape said, "of what is possible when people with different kinds of intelligence decide to work together rather than separately. Your mother and I were not strategic about it. We did not plan. We simply were what we were, and it was sufficient until it wasn't. The office was very quiet." "You're offering to teach us," Draco said. "I am offering," Snape said, "to give you tools the standard curriculum will not give you for another 4 years, if ever. Occlumency. The theoretical foundations of high-level wardcraft. The formal structure of historical dueling. The codified, witnessed, legally binding form that carries real social and legal weight." He looked at them both. "In exchange for honesty. When you make a decision that affects this house or this school, I know before it happens, not after." "We can't guarantee before," Harry said. "Some decisions are made in the moment. We can guarantee disclosure within 24 hours of any significant action." "And we need the same from you," Draco said. "Not everything. We understand your position is complicated, but anything that directly affects our safety or standing. 24 hours. Snape looked at him for a long moment. "You're negotiating with me," he said. "We're establishing terms," Draco said. "It's different." 24 hours, Snape said, "on both sides, with the explicit understanding that there are things I cannot disclose, and I will tell you when that is the case." "That's acceptable," Harry said. The occlumency began the following Saturday. "Your mind is not a location," Snape said. "It is not a room with a door that can be locked. Practitioners who think of it as a room spend all their energy on the door and neglect the contents. A skilled legilimens does not knock." He looked at them both. "They find a window you didn't know was there." "So the technique is about what you show," Harry said. "Not what you hide. It's about architecture," Snape said. "You organize your mind. You know where the things that matter are, and you know what surrounds them, and you decide in advance what you want a legilimens to find if they look. You give them something true that tells them nothing useful." He paused. "My father uses legilimency," Draco said. "Yes," Snape said, "which is why I'm teaching you this and not the defense professor." It was during the occlumency work of their 2nd year that something surfaced, something Harry had not expected and Snape had not initially identified. It happened gradually. Over several sessions, as Snape moved through Harry's organized mental architecture, he kept encountering a specific resistance in one region. Not the trained resistance of a developing occlumens, but something older, something that had been there far longer than any practice. Something that pushed back with the specific weight of a presence that was not Harry. Snape withdrew from the exercise without completing it. He stood very still for a moment. "Potter," he said carefully, "when your parents died, what do you know about what happened?" "Voldemort came to Godric's Hollow," Harry said. "He killed my father first, then my mother, because she refused to step aside. Then the killing curse rebounded." "And the rebounding," Snape said. "What do you understand to have occurred in that moment?" "The curse couldn't. There's a theory about loving sacrifice creating a magical protection." "My mother's death?" "Yes," Snape said. "That is the accepted understanding." He paused for a long time. "But the rebound of a killing curse, in a space charged with sacrificial magic against an infant, it did not simply destroy the one who cast it." He seemed to make a decision. "There is material in the Black family archive. the section on soul magic, not the Horcrux materials specifically, but the theoretical framework around what happens when a soul is fractured beyond its caster's control. He looked at Harry steadily. "I would like you to read it, and I would like Hermione to read it, and then I would like you to come back to me." "What am I looking for?" Harry said. "You will know it," Snape said, "when you find it." Hermione found the theoretical framework in 3 days. She read it in the east corner at 2 a.m. and then sat very still for a while before she spoke. "The resonance test," she said. "When I did it at the manor, the letter opener showed my signature clearly. If we ran one on Harry, the reading would show 2 signatures," Harry said. He had known, somewhere below the level of articulate understanding. Since Snape had stopped mid-session and gone very still. One that was put there without intention. "A fragment," Hermione said, "when the curse rebounded. The original caster's soul was already fractured. The text talks about how catastrophically unstable a soul becomes when it has been deliberately split multiple times. When the curse hit the sacrificial protection and reflected, the shock of it, a fragment attached to the nearest living vessel." "Me," Harry said. "You," she said. Draco had not spoken. He was looking at the table. "The Horcrux research," he said finally. They had been using the term from a black archive text that named the practice, treating it with appropriate revulsion throughout. "We've been working through the others. The diary, whatever else he made." He looked at Harry. "You're one too." "An unintentional one," Harry said. "Made by accident." "The text Hermione found, are there differences between an intentional creation and an accidental one?" Hermione was already turning pages. "The anchor," she said. "An intentional Horcrux is anchored through a deliberate act of murder and a specific ritual. An accidental fragment has no anchor ritual. It attaches because the circumstances force it to, not because the original soul directed it." That means she ran her finger down the page. "The binding on it is different. Less structurally integrated. It exists in you, but it isn't woven into you the same way a deliberate creation would be." "Which means," Harry said slowly, "there might be a way to extract it without it killing you," Hermione said. "Possibly. I need more time with this material, and we need to tell Snape." They told Snape the following morning. He sat with the information for a very long time without speaking. Then he said, "The grimoire from the Manor Library. The advanced binding section. The extraction variant Hermione found." He looked at Harry. "The theoretical possibility of applying it to a living host rather than a constructed object, I had considered it abstractly, in context of the dark arts I was trained in. I had not considered it as a practical necessity." "Does it work?" Harry said. "I don't know," Snape said, with the specific honesty of someone who never claimed more certainty than they had. "The conditions would need to be exactly right. The original caster's soul would need to be sufficiently weakened for the fragment to be unstable, susceptible to extraction rather than transfer." He looked at Harry. "You understand what I'm saying? We can't do it until he's already been reduced," Harry said. "Until enough of the others are gone, that what's left of him is barely holding together." "Yes," Snape said. "That is when." The writing appeared on the second-floor corridor wall on a Thursday in autumn of their second year. Harry read it on his way to breakfast, stopped, read it twice, and looked at Mrs. Norris hanging stiff and frozen from the torch bracket beside it. He went to find Draco without touching anything. Hermione had begun researching before they arrived. She had the founding charter, the black archives section on the founder's dispute, and the notation for a serpent of catastrophic scale described in one text as a weapon Salazar Slytherin had intended to use against Muggle-born students. "Basilisk," Harry said. "The description matches," Hermione confirmed. "Lethal gaze, lethal breath, ancient. If it's been there since the school's founding, it's been alive for 1,000 years. Controlled by whoever opened the chamber, Harry said, which is not necessarily whoever is giving the orders. Hermione had also been watching Ginny Weasley. Over 3 weeks, she had observed that the youngest Weasley's handwriting had changed quality, confident and thorough early in term, pressured and uneven in recent weeks. She had seen that pattern in a text from the Manor Library, a chapter on influence objects designed to work through their possessor. She brought it to Harry on a Sunday. He thought about it for 48 hours. Then he went to Ginny Weasley directly. The conversation happened in an empty classroom on a Wednesday. Ginny came because Harry had sent the note himself, in handwriting she'd recognize. She arrived with the expression of someone who had been frightened for weeks and had not known who to tell, waiting without knowing they were waiting for someone to notice. Harry told her what he believed was happening. Not gently, clearly, she gave him the diary. Her hands were steady. Her jaw was set. He recognized in her the quality of someone who has been managing something alone and has reached the point where relief and humiliation arrive simultaneously, and who is choosing with visible effort to prioritize the relief. "You're not in trouble," Harry said. "The object is in trouble." "It felt like a friend," she said. "At first. It understood things. It remembered everything I told it. It was designed to," Harry said. "That's not a reflection of your judgment. That's a reflection of how sophisticated the design is." She left. Harry held the diary and felt the wrongness of it. Not cold exactly, wrong in a direction he'd been developing vocabulary for since the Manor Library's sole magic texts. A presence animating itself from an internal source that had no business being there. He brought it to Snape that evening. Snape held the diary for 12 seconds and set it on his desk without picking it up again. "This is not something I can address through standard channels," he said. "The nature of what's in it," he paused. "Someone placed this in a student's possessions deliberately. Someone who had access to her belongings." "In Diagon Alley, yes," Harry said. "I have known about the chamber's entrance since shortly after becoming head of Slytherin," Snape said. "It is documented in certain dark arts historical texts concerning Slytherin's architecture that are available through the Death Eater correspondence I had access to before abandoning that affiliation. The entrance is in the second-floor girls' bathroom. A sink. A serpent on the tap. Parseltongue activated. He said this with the flat deliberateness of someone fulfilling the terms of an agreement to disclose, rather than someone comfortable disclosing. I chose not to act on that knowledge, because doing so would have required explaining how I knew, which at the time I was not in a position to explain. "And now?" Harry said. "And now you have a diary containing something of his, and a basilisk with a current directive, and a student who has been used as an instrument." Snape looked at him. "The basilisk can be redirected if someone can speak to it before it receives further instruction through the diary. Destroy the diary first, and you remove the active direction. But a basilisk without a directive in an enclosed space is not safe. The order matters." "Reach the basilisk first," Harry said. "Redirect it, then destroy the diary. You have a fang from the chamber floor?" Snape said. He knew about the research. He knew about all of it by this point. The venom works on objects containing fragments of a fractured soul. A standard property of basilisk venom, it destroys the magical integrity of such constructs permanently. Harry kept the fang he'd brought back from his research into the chamber entrance in mind. He had been in the chamber entrance once already, practicing the Parseltongue address. He knew the layout. "Can you get into the chamber?" Snape said. "Yes," Harry said. Harry went alone on a Friday night. Because the chamber was Parseltongue locked, and Draco and Hermione could not follow past the entrance point, and because in this specific situation going alone was not recklessness, but necessity. Draco had pressed a small circular mirror into his hand before he went. Silver-framed, old, from the Manor Library's collection of practical magical tools. "The gaze is lethal direct," Draco said. "Reflected is different. You can track it without looking at it." Harry took the mirror. The chamber was vast in the way that underground spaces were vast, the ceiling lost in darkness, the sound of the place preceding the sight of it. Harry moved through it with the mirror angled before him. The basilisk was at the far end. Enormous in a way numbers did not capture, 1,000 years of purpose and isolation, and the particular patience of something that had been given a directive and had not yet completed it. Harry stopped. He spoke. "I am not your enemy." The basilisk went still. "You can hear me," it said, not a question. "Yes," a long silence. "The voice in the book told me to hunt, to find." "The book is wrong," Harry said. "The book was made by someone who wanted to use you. That isn't the same as someone who can speak to you. You are different from the book." "The book is a piece of someone," Harry said. "I am a person. I'm asking you to stop." The basilisk's head moved slowly, the gravity of significant mass reorienting. "What do you want me to do?" "Stay here," Harry said. "In this chamber. We will close it again, and you will be here, and no one will send directions through an object again because the object will be gone. The chamber is yours. It has always been yours. I am asking you to let it be only yours." The basilisk lowered its massive head. "You will seal it." "Yes, and the hunting stops. The hunting stops." A very long silence. "Agreed," the basilisk said. "Close your chamber. Heir, do not lose the key." Harry used the fang on the diary after. One puncture through the cover. The ink that bled was not ink. It was something that had been using ink as a medium, and the difference was visible when it left, spreading cold across the chamber floor and then becoming nothing. He sealed the chamber in Parseltongue. He told them everything at 2 a.m. in the east corner, firelight low, water dark beyond the windows. "The diary," Hermione said when he finished. "What was in it?" "A piece of someone," Harry said. "Preserved through methods the Black Archive describes, but doesn't endorse. A younger version of him. Before he became what he became." "My father," Draco said. "Not a conclusion. An arrival. The diary came through someone with access to Ginny Weasley's possessions at the start of term," Harry said. "At flourish and blots. He may not have known exactly what kind of weapon it was. He knew it was dark. He knew it was a weapon." He looked at Draco steadily. "That distinction matters for what we do next." "Document it," Hermione said. "Everything we know, everything we can prove. We don't use it yet, but we have it." Harry looked at the fire. "We document it," he said, "and we wait." Harry found the relevant legal precedent in the Black Archive during their 3rd year while working through the Lineage and Governance section, a case from the 19th century involving a wrongfully imprisoned family member, and the mechanism by which the conviction had been overturned. A joint petition, directly to the Wizengamot, filed by 2 or more parties with documented standing, requesting a formal review on the grounds of new evidence. He read it 3 times. Then he went to find Draco. "Sirius Black," Harry said. "Convicted without a formal trial. The Wizengamot's own charter requires a formal hearing before a conviction is recorded. There's no record of a hearing." "Because there was no hearing," Draco said. "The conviction is procedurally void," Harry said. "He's not a legally convicted man. He's a man being held without conviction. And that's a different legal status with a specific mechanism for addressing it." "The joint petition," Draco said slowly. 2 petitioners with Wizengamot standing. The Malfoy seat and the Potter seat. Hermione had been building the file since October. She slid it across the table, 19 pieces of documented evidence, including a detailed analysis of the Pettigrew death record, which showed no body recovered, no wand recovered, no witness to the death itself, no investigation into the possibility that the street explosion had been deliberately staged, and 11 specific inconsistencies in the standard account. "If Pettigrew staged his death," Harry said, "the primary evidence against Sirius disappears. And without it, Draco said, what remains is a man arrested at a scene by people who assumed his guilt rather than investigated it. Harry looked at the file. He thought about Sirius Black, his father's best friend, the person his parents had trusted most in the world, sitting in Azkaban for a crime that the evidence, examined correctly, did not support. He thought about the specific kind of injustice that persists not because it's defensible, but because no one with standing has filed the correct paperwork. "We file," Harry said. The petition was 14 pages. Hermione's evidence file as appendix. The legal framework developed with Snape's review, returned with 4 corrections, and the observation that it was the most comprehensively argued student legal document he had encountered, a category he had not previously needed to develop. The Wizengamot received it under the 2 family seats. Fudge sent objections within a week, each of which had been anticipated and addressed in the petition's documentation. Dumbledore's annotation on the forwarded letter said simply, "The objections are noted. The hearing will proceed." Harry showed this to Draco. "He knew," Draco said, "about the procedural void. He's the chief warlock. He's known for years," Harry said. "That's the question I don't have an answer to yet." He folded the letter and filed it in the section of the evidence archive marked open questions. Unanswered questions were not absent from the record. They were present in it, waiting. Harry wrote to Sirius Black, 2 pages, composing it over a month, sent through the official prisoner correspondence channel because it was documented, and therefore evidential. "A hearing has been scheduled," he wrote. "We have evidence that the conviction is procedurally void and that the primary witness against you did not die. Hold on until the hearing." 3 weeks later, a reply arrived. 2 words, in unsteady but legible handwriting. "I know." Harry held the letter for a long time. Then he added it to the evidence archive and went to find Hermione and Draco, because there was still a great deal of work to do. The hearing lasted 3 hours. Hermione's full evidence file entered into the Wizengamot record. Remus Lupin, located through the Black family address records, arrived in robes that were carefully pressed and bore the quality of someone who had prepared for this with everything he had. The procedural void argument was the mechanism. The strongest position was not Sirius's innocent, that required Pettigrew to answer. The strongest position was the conviction is void, because the process that produced it did not exist. The Wizengamot's own charter answered that on their behalf. The vote was 31-9. Sirius Orion Black. Wrongful imprisonment. Conviction expunged. He came to Hogwarts a few weeks later. Thin in the way people were thin after years in Azkaban, looking at Harry with an expression that had been prepared and had not survived the preparation. "You look like your father," Sirius said. "Except the eyes." "I know," Harry said. "I've been told." Sirius crossed the room and put his hand on Harry's shoulder briefly. Harry understood this was the most Sirius could currently manage and that it was also everything he had. "Draco helped," Harry said. "The Malfoy seat standing made the petition viable." Sirius blinked. Draco Malfoy. Lucius Malfoy's son. "He's also someone who made a decision about where his loyalty sat," Harry said. 2 years ago. On a train. Sirius looked at him. "Show me," he said. "Show me what you've built." The Board of Governors had not materially changed composition since the mid-70s, and Lucius Malfoy had been its effective center for a decade. Harry had been reading the board's governance documents since their 2nd year. Hermione had been annotating them since their 1st. The Charter's accountability section required that board members act in students' genuine interests and could be removed by a 2/3 majority vote in documented cases of conflict of interest or conduct contrary to the school's welfare. The provision had never been invoked, not because conflicts hadn't existed, because no one had assembled the documentation needed to invoke it. The documentation took 18 months. The file, when complete, had 37 pieces of evidence across 4 categories: financial, influence, the Lucius category, and composition. Hermione built the connection map. 3 pages, color-coded. They presented it to Dumbledore in October of their 4th year. He read the file in 45 minutes and the map for another 10. Then, he sat with it. "You've been building this since your 2nd year," he said. "The groundwork began in 2nd year," Hermione said. "The documentation became comprehensive in 3rd. The Lucius category," Dumbledore said. "The diary evidence is sufficient to support a conflict of interest finding under Section 12 of the Charter," Harry said. "A board member whose conduct directly contributed to a crisis in the school he was supposed to be overseeing has an unambiguous conflict of interest." "Lucius will retaliate," Dumbledore said. "Lucius's primary tool of retaliation is board influence," Draco said. "If he's removed from the board, that tool is gone." Dumbledore looked at the map for a long time. "I will file it," he said. The board hearing was in November. 12 members, documentation distributed 10 days in advance. Harry and Draco attended as petitioning parties. Hermione attended as the researcher whose documentation formed the petition's basis, a category of attendance the Charter permitted, and which no student had ever needed to invoke before. Lucius Malfoy sat across the table with legal representation and counter-documentation. He had spent 10 days building his response with considerable resources. He had not spent 2 years building the file in front of the board members. The counter-documentation addressed the financial category partially. It did not address the influence category. It did not address the diary evidence. On the diary evidence, the legal representation said, "Insufficient chain of documentation to establish direct connection." Harry had prepared for this in September. He placed on the table a certified transaction authentication from Gringotts, a formal document confirming the specific magical signature of the diary's acquisition record matching the signature on file for Lucius Malfoy's account. The kind of authenticated connection the word insufficient could not be applied to without the person applying it being demonstrably wrong. He placed it on the table and said nothing. Lucius's representation conferred with his client. For the first time in 3 years of knowing him, Harry watched Lucius Malfoy say nothing. The vote was 8-4. Lucius Malfoy removed for conflict of interest, conduct contrary to the school's welfare, and financial impropriety. 3 additional members removed on the financial category grounds. 4 new members to be appointed through the reformed process Hermione had drafted and attached as an appendix, because she had understood from the beginning that removing the existing members was only half the work, and had built the replacement mechanism in parallel with the removal case. Outside the hearing room, in the corridor, Lucius passed them on his way to the exit. He stopped. He looked at his son. The expression on his face was more precise than anger. The expression of a man who has spent a decade building a specific future for a specific person and is standing in a room watching that person look back at him from inside a different future entirely. One built without him, around him, and in several important ways against him. "The Charter's mechanisms exist for a reason," Draco said. "You used them yourself, against Dumbledore in Harry's 2nd year." Lucius was very still. "I know how to read a document," Draco said. "You taught me that." A pause. "You didn't specify which documents." Lucius looked at Harry. Then he walked to the exit. The door closed. Draco watched the door. Harry stood beside him and did not say anything, because there was nothing to say that Draco needed to hear from outside himself. After a moment, Hermione said, very quietly, the replacement process document. "I want to review the appointment criteria before it goes to Dumbledore." Draco looked at her. Something moved in his expression, not quite a smile, not quite relief. The specific expression of someone who has been offered, in the form of a procedural observation, exactly what they needed, the next thing to do. "Show me," he said. They went back inside. The announcement came through official ministry channels in late summer before their 4th year, and Hermione had opened 3 research files on the subject before term began. The first contained the tournament's founding charter. The second held the historical record of every tournament since the 13th century. The third was her analysis of the current tournament's rules, the gaps in those rules, and what those gaps meant for anyone paying the right kind of attention. She gave it to Harry and Draco in September. They read it over a weekend. On Monday, they talked for 2 hours, and at the end of it, they had a plan. "The tournament is a stage," Harry said. "It has an audience, the school, the press, the ministry, the international community. What that audience sees matters more than who takes the cup." "What do we want them to see?" Draco said. "That coordinated preparation and shared resources outperform individual heroics," Harry said. "The model we've been building for 3 years, demonstrated. The founding charter allows preparation support from outside parties," Hermione said. "There's no restriction on preparation, only on active assistance during the tasks themselves. Champions must face the tasks alone. But nothing prevents arriving at those tasks with the best possible preparation." She looked up, and in Section 9, there's a provision that hasn't been used since the 19th century. A champion may formally designate preparation partners, on record, as part of their submission. It doesn't specify a maximum number. Draco looked at her. "No one's used it in nearly 2 centuries. No one read the charter carefully enough," Hermione said. The age line went up, and Harry submitted his name when the entrance hall had quieted, handing his parchment at the goblet's edge without crossing the restricted circle, the blue-white flame drawing it from his outstretched hand. On the parchment, beneath his name, the formal Section 9 designation, 2 preparation partners, Hermione Granger and Draco Malfoy. McGonagall watched. "The additional line," she said. "Section 9 of the founding charter," Harry said. "The designation hasn't been used since around 1842. The provision remains operative. I had it confirmed through Gringotts Legal." McGonagall looked at the goblet for a long moment with the expression she wore when a situation had exceeded its expected parameters. "Good night, Mr. Potter," she said. The goblet selected 4 names on Halloween: Fleur Delacour for Beauxbaton, Victor Krum for Durmstrang, Cedric Diggory for Hogwarts, and Harry Potter. Harry walked to the front of the hall as he walked into every formal situation, as someone who had already considered what was about to happen and decided how to be in it. In the back room with the champions and officials, Bartemius Crouch received the Section 9 documentation with the expression of a man who had written rules and was not accustomed to discovering someone had read them more carefully than he had. "The provision is valid," he said, in the tone of stating an inconvenient fact. Through the year, something nagged at Harry. The tournament official standing in for Alistair Moody, the gruff, paranoid, glass-eyed defense professor, felt wrong in a specific way Harry had learned to trust. The man's attention patterns were wrong. His interest in Harry was wrong. The specific quality of the interest, not wariness or academic curiosity, but something more focused, more directional, like someone monitoring a plan's progress. Harry flagged it in his notes. He shared it with Snape. Snape's response when it came was one of the fastest disclosures under their agreement. Alistair Moody is not in the castle. Verify his presence elsewhere. When they followed the thread, it led to a trunk with a compartmentalized lock in Moody's office, and to the confirmed existence of Barty Crouch Jr., convicted Death Eater, son of the Triwizard Tournament's official overseer, believed dead, operating inside the school on Polyjuice Potion. BCJ's purpose: to ensure Harry reached the Triwizard Cup at the end of the final task, which BCJ had been quietly converting into a portkey all year, rigged to deliver Harry to Little Hangleton. Snape disclosed this to Dumbledore. Dumbledore moved carefully, too carefully in Harry's assessment, but that was a question for later. The real Moody was recovered. BCJ was contained. The Portkey Cup remained in the tournament, because removing it would require explaining things Dumbledore was not yet willing to explain publicly. But now, Harry knew exactly what it was. He planned accordingly. The first task was dragons. Harry knew 3 days before from Hagrid's traditional preview, which Hermione had identified in the historical record as an expected disclosure mechanism. He returned and told them what he'd seen. They worked until 2 in the morning. 12 pages. Hermione's handwriting, organized in dependency order. Strategy, 3 contingency variations. Behavioral analysis of the Hungarian horntail. The task's scoring criteria from historical records. Harry read it, set it down. "This is the best preparation for a dragon task that has ever existed," he said. "Probably," Hermione said. "Definitely," Draco said. The morning of the first task, Draco was in the Champions preparation area under the explicit provision of Section 9, final briefing permitted. Cedric Diggory looked at the 12-page document with open curiosity. Victor Krum looked at it with the expression of someone who had encountered a level of preparation categorically different from his own. Harry and Draco ran through the final briefing in 12 minutes because they had rehearsed it 7 times. After the task, 49 seconds short of the fastest historical first task time in Hermione's records, the golden egg in hand, Rita Skeeter appeared in the press area with her quick quotes quill already moving. Hermione stepped forward with 2 pages of documentation before Skeeter had finished her opening question. The preparation partner provision is in Section 9 of the Founding Charter, publicly available through the International Confederation of Wizards Records Office since the 13th century, Hermione said. Any Champions preparation team could have identified and invoked it. The provision exists because the tournament's founders understood that coordinated preparation produces better outcomes than isolated effort. That is its stated purpose, documented in the preamble. An advantage available to all parties and used by one is not unfair, it is simply used. Skeeter looked at the document. The quick quotes quill went into her bag. "I'll need to verify the charter reference," she said. "Page 47, Section 9, Subsection 3, Hermione said. "I've included the archive location in the document." Harry watched from 6 feet away. Draco appeared at his shoulder. "The quill went in the bag," Draco said. "She'll still write something," Harry said. "She'll write something accurate," Harry said. "That's the difference." Harry had identified the Triwizard Cup as wrong the moment he touched it, modified, carrying the specific signature of a portkey constructed with more than ordinary intent. He did not release it because releasing mid-transit produced outcomes the Black Archives section on portkey mechanics described as unsurvivable. He landed on his feet in the graveyard because he had been told to expect a landing and had prepared his body for it. And beside him, landing hard on his knees but upright within seconds, was Cedric Diggory. "What?" Cedric said. "Don't move," Harry said. He was already scanning. Long grass between old headstones. The specific sky of rural England after dark. "It's a portkey. We've been moved. This isn't the task." Cedric looked at him. "You knew." "I suspected. I knew the cup had been tampered with." Harry was already pulling information from the files. The Riddle family history, Little Hangleton. The graveyard's significance as documented in Hermione's notes on known locations relevant to Voldemort's history. He'd shared the full file with Cedric 2 weeks ago because the Section 9 structure had made Cedric's preparation and Harry's overlap in ways that had gradually become collaborative. Cedric had been reading. Cedric had been paying attention. "Riddle," Cedric said, looking at the largest headstone. "This is Little Hangleton." "Yes," Harry said. "And someone is here." Wormtail materialized from between the stones, carrying something small and dark wrapped in cloth, a remnant thing, barely holding its own shape, radiating wrongness in the specific way Harry had learned to recognize from 2 years of working with the soul magic texts. Harry hit the cauldron with a freezing charm before Wormtail had fully registered their presence. The cauldron's temperature dropped, not enough to prevent what Wormtail intended, but enough to slow it. Time was the variable he was purchasing. "Stay low," Harry said to Cedric, quietly, behind the headstones to the left. "Don't engage. Observe, and be ready to run if I tell you to run." Cedric moved. He didn't argue. He'd read the file. Wormtail turned. "Who, Peter?" Harry said. Wormtail's expression went through several things rapidly. He raised his wand. Harry moved. The binding spell he cast was from the Black Family Grimoire section on diminished magical entities, specifically the variant for fragments of will that had not yet achieved stable physical form. He had practiced it for 2 months, in the east corner of the Slytherin common room, late, with Draco as witness and Hermione timing the whole duration. The binding hit the thing Wormtail carried and produced a sound with no human analog, not pain exactly, more like a structure meeting sudden constraint. Wormtail stumbled. Harry stunned him while he was off balance. Wormtail went down hard, both hands, his own, flesh and bone, no silver yet, hitting the ground as he fell. The thing he'd been carrying landed with him, still bound, the graveyard going quiet except for wind and the sound of something very old and very diminished, straining against a constraint it could not overcome. Harry crouched beside it. Tom Riddle, reduced to this, a fragment of will and spite, the specific terror of a man who had spent 50 years refusing to die and had found that refusing to die and actually living were not the same thing. He thought through the file systematically. 6 Horcrux objects addressed, the diary destroyed in the chamber, the locket retrieved from Grimold Place through Sirius's legal access and destroyed with basilisk venom, the cup accessed through the Malfoy and Potter account standing at Gringotts, the ring recovered in August through the Gaunt family records in the Black Archive. The ring had been the worst. The destruction of the ring Horcrux had been straightforward with the venom, but the curse woven into the ring itself, a separate lethal construction layered over the Horcrux like a second trap, had nearly killed Draco when he handled it. He had spent 3 weeks recovering and had not complained once, which was its own form of courage. They had learned from it, addressed the curse architecture first, the Horcrux second. The ring's Horcrux was gone. Draco had healed. Nagini was here. Harry could feel the Horcrux signature of her, the same sensitivity that had developed through 2 years of working with the soul magic texts. He addressed her next. "I am going to take something from you," Harry said in Parseltongue. "Something that was put inside you without your knowledge. It will hurt briefly. After it is done, you will be free of it." "The Master put it there," Nagini said. "The Master is bound on the ground. He cannot give you instructions." A long pause. "Does it hurt less than the Master's instructions?" "Yes," Harry said. "Then proceed." The extraction was from the Grimoire's advanced binding section, the variant Hermione had annotated over 3 months, verified by Snape with 12 corrections and the notation, "The underlying theory is sound." Harry held the technique for 4 minutes by his internal count. The fragment came out of Nagini slowly, reluctantly, an anchoring of years resisting release, the resistance decreasing in stages until it stopped. Nagini lowered her head. "It is gone. Go," Harry said. "Into the field. Don't come back here." She went. That left what remained before him in the bound form on the graveyard ground. And it left one more fragment, the one Harry had been carrying since the night of his first birthday. He had understood since Snape's occlumency session what this moment required. Not basilisk venom, not the Grimoire's extraction technique alone. Those worked on constructed Horcruxes, intentional ones, bound by a deliberate ritual anchor. The fragment in Harry had no such anchor. It was structural only because his survival had kept it housed. If the main soul's remaining form was sufficiently weakened, bound, contained, stripped of the fragments that had given it coherence, the sympathetic connection between his soul fragment and the original would become a liability rather than an anchor. The binding he had cast on the remnant form was doing exactly that. Weakening it, Harry could feel the fragment in himself responding to the weakening, becoming less stable, less integrated, the way Hermione had described from the theoretical text, less structurally woven, more like a passenger that had stayed past the journey's end. He reached into his inner robe pocket and withdrew the silver containment case, goblin silver alloy, rune inscribed. Commissioned from the Manor's silversmith in March after Hermione had found the containment specifications, sealed with 3 locking charms, requiring all 3 of their magical signatures. He opened it. He used the transfer technique on the bound remnant form first, the 6-minute process, the resistance familiar now, the fragment eventually consenting to the container the way things consented when the alternative was nothing. Then he turned the technique on himself. This was the part Snape had said he did not know if it would work. The conditions were: original caster's soul must be sufficiently weakened, fragment must be destabilized, living host must be willing. Willing, Harry had said. You must want it out, Snape had said. Not just be resigned to its leaving. The technique requires intent from the host. The fragment will not release from a host who is ambivalent. Harry was not ambivalent. The extraction from himself lasted 8 minutes and was the most unpleasant thing he had ever experienced. A pulling sensation that had no anatomical location, a cold that was specifically not temperature, and then a moment that felt, briefly, like the loss of something he had been carrying so long he had mistaken it for himself. Then it was gone. He was lighter in a way that had nothing to do with weight. He sealed the case. He sat on a nearby headstone and waited for the ministry officials, who would arrive via the tournament's distress signal, red sparks, fired into the sky over Little Hangleton, bringing the response that would process Wormtail's capture through the correct institutional chain. He added the supplementary signal that meant bring to for extraction, the prearranged code he and Snape had established for this exact contingency. Cedric emerged from behind the headstones. He looked at Harry for a long moment, at the inert form on the ground, at Wormtail, stunned, hands visible, both ordinary, both empty, at the silver case in Harry's inner pocket. "Is it done?" Cedric said. "It's done," Harry said. Cedric sat on the headstone beside his. Neither of them said anything else until the officials came. The Wizengamot hearings that followed occupied most of the next 3 years. Wormtail's capture and confession unraveled threads that reached into corners of wizarding society that had believed themselves safely insulated. BCJ's exposure brought Fudge's ministry into a period of sustained scrutiny it had not faced in a generation. The containment case was presented to an expert panel: Dumbledore, 2 unspeakables, and an independent ward specialist selected by Hermione from the reformed board's new oversight structure, verified, and kept under the 3-signature security protocol. It was never a dramatic ending. That was the point. No final battle, no chosen hero standing alone against impossible odds. Instead, documentation, correctly assembled and correctly filed, through the right institutional channels by 3 people who had spent 4 years building the preparation that made it possible. The blood status registry was abolished in the year following the hearings, not as a gesture but as a procedurally correct abolition, built on a legal framework Hermione had been assembling since their 5th year, processed through the correct channels, witnessed by the correct parties. The Wizengamot added 3 new seats open to Muggle-born families, passed by a 7-vote margin after 14 months of the kind of sustained, documented institutional pressure that Harry and Draco and Hermione had been developing the capacity for since they were 11. These things did not happen quickly. They happened correctly. The difference was everything. King's Cross on a September morning, 19 years later. The platform materialized in its familiar way. The scarlet engine. The steam. The specific noise of families managing the logistics of departure with varying degrees of composure. Trunks and owls and pointed hats, and the texture of people who had done this before alongside people who hadn't. Harry stood near the barrier with his hands in his coat pockets and watched. He was 30 years old. The watching had not changed. The same quality of attention he had brought to this kind of moment since he was 11. What had changed was what he did with what he noticed. Draco arrived with his son beside him, Scorpius, 11, with the Malfoy coloring, and the specific quality of a child prepared for this day without having been told to perform the preparation. Draco and Harry stood together in the way they had stood together for 19 years, side by side, enough space between them that neither was in the other's peripheral vision, both with clear sight lines to the environment. "He's nervous," Draco said. "He shouldn't be," Harry said. "He knows that," Draco said. "Knowing and feeling are different." "Yes," Harry said. "They are." Hermione arrived with Rose on one side, and Hugo trailing behind reading something he hadn't looked up from since they left the car. She had the same forward momentum she had always had, the notebook in her bag that was never not within reach. The expression of someone taking in the environment with genuine interest, because taking in environments with genuine interest was not a habit she had ever stopped having. The three of them stood together the way they had stood together since they were 11 and 12, and had been working out the terms on which they would inhabit their world. Rose and Scorpius looked at each other with the assessing quality of children meeting children they've heard about and are now forming independent opinions of. "Scorpius," Rose said. "Rose," Scorpius said. They reached simultaneous and compatible conclusions and moved toward the train together without further discussion, the most efficient possible outcome. Hugo looked up from his book long enough to determine that everyone else was moving, then followed without breaking reading stride. Something he had learned from his mother. Sirius found Harry near the barrier before the train departed. He was in his early 60s and looked a decade younger, which was partly the Black family's bone structure and partly the particular quality of someone who had spent 15 years making up for years that had been taken. Not younger exactly, but more present, more deliberate about the use of the time available. "Teddy's already on board," Sirius said. "He went through 20 minutes ago. He'll find them. He always does," Harry said. Sirius looked at the platform. "My first time, seeing one of them off. I know. Your father would have been insufferable today," Sirius said. "He would have embarrassed himself completely and enjoyed every second of it." "Yes," Harry said. "Your mother would have cried and pretended she wasn't." "Yes," Harry said again. Sirius put his hand on Harry's shoulder briefly, the same gesture as the sitting room off the entrance hall, 19 years earlier, which had been everything he could manage then, and was now one of many things he could offer, which was its own kind of accounting. The train departed at 11 precisely. The Ministry of Magic was different now. Not physically. The same marble atrium, the same fountain, the same flue connections. But the composition of the people moving through it had changed in the incremental, almost invisible way that institutions changed when their governing mechanisms were genuinely reformed rather than superficially adjusted. Hermione had an 11 o'clock. She said it the way she said everything, directly, without apology for the calendar, which had been full since she was appointed deputy head of magical law enforcement, and had immediately begun reforming the department's evidence standards, which had been, in her assessment, an embarrassment to the concept of documentation. She was now the head. Harry walked with her to the lift. "The Hogwarts Governance Committee," she said. "This afternoon. Are you coming?" "Yes," Harry said. "Draco?" "Wizengamote's session at 2. He'll join after." She nodded, got in the lift. "The new students started today," she said. "I know. Some of them will find the east corner of the Slytherin common room," she said. "The good ones. The ones who were paying attention," Harry said. "Yes," she said. The lift doors closed. Harry walked through the atrium. He passed a group of new ministry trainees on the orientation route. One of them stopped at the eastern wall, where a bronze plaque had been mounted 4 years earlier. Plain lettering, Hermione's specification, no ornate script. The Sovereign Circle. In recognition of the documented legal, political, and institutional work conducted between 1991 and 1997 that resulted in the reform of the Hogwarts Board of Governors, the expansion of Wizengamot representation, the abolition of blood status classification, and the defeat of Lord Voldemort, Harry Potter, Draco Malfoy, Hermione Granger. Below the names, a single line: power exercised through preparation, documentation, and cooperation. The trainee read it, turned to the senior official beside her. "My professor said they're the reason the old board system doesn't exist anymore," she said. "Your professor is correct," the official said, already moving. The tour continued. The trainee looked at the plaque for a moment longer. Then, she followed. Harry had watched this happen before: trainees, visiting school groups, journalists doing historical features, people encountering what had happened as history, rather than as something that had taken place across a specific number of late nights and filed documents and quiet, sustained, unglamorous work. He did not correct the details they got wrong. He did not insert himself into conversations happening in front of the plaque. He had known, since a train compartment when he was 11 years old, that the most durable form of power was the kind built into the mechanism rather than the kind that required the original builder to keep holding it up. The work was in the mechanism now. The mechanism was running. He went to find Sirius. Lunch at the restaurant in Diagon Alley they had been going to since Sirius's first month of freedom, a place that had become theirs through repetition, through September 1sts and ordinary Tuesdays and everything in between. Draco was already there. Sirius was ordering something he did not need and arguing pleasantly with the waiter about it, which was something Sirius did at every meal and which the restaurant staff had developed the same patient expertise in managing as Harry and Draco had. Harry sat down. The restaurant was warm and loud in the way of places that had been in business long enough to develop their own atmosphere. Outside the window, Diagon Alley was quieter than it had been in the morning. The September family's gone, the street settling into its midday rhythm. Draco looked at him. "Scorpius got on the train," Draco said. "He did," Harry said. "He'll be fine," Draco said. "He will," Harry said. A pause. "I know," Draco said. Sirius won his argument with the waiter. The outcome everyone had known was coming, the performance of resistance being as much part of the ritual as the food itself. He sat back and looked at Harry and Draco across the table. James would have been insufferable, Harry and Draco said simultaneously. Sirius looked at them. Something moved in his face that was not grief, and was not its absence, and was made of both, and had been sitting at this specific table with these specific people for 15 years. Yes, he said. He would. The food arrived. Outside, Diagon Alley went on in its ordinary way. The shops open, the owls overhead. The street busy with the particular purposeful energy of a world that was not perfect and was not finished and was better than it had been, which was the only honest measure available, and the one Harry had learned over 19 years to find sufficient. Not because sufficient was the same as good enough, because sufficient was what you built toward, one documented piece of evidence at a time, in the east corner of a common room, and the halls of the Wizengamot, and the long corridors of the ministry, with the people you had chosen and who had chosen you, until the mechanism ran without you and the work became the world. He ate his lunch. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.